All right, continuing our coverage of the devastating earthquake in Japan, we want to expand our discussion on how world markets are responding and what the long-term economic impact might be. Joining us now is one of the most accurate economic forecasters based on the data compiled by Bloomberg, Scott Brown, chief economist at Raymond James. We call him a Bloomberg best. Scott, let me ask you, first of all, what you expect the effects to be on Japan. Obviously, they've already borrowed very heavily. They have a lot of debt. And typically, Mike McKee was just telling us, after a disaster like this, governments spend even more. Obviously, they have to rebuild what's been broken down. How is that going to work in Japan?
Well, Japan does have a very large government debt, about 200% of GDP, but it also has a very high private savings rate. I wouldn't expect to see much of a problem in the government rate being able to raise funds to do any sort of rebuilding of infrastructure. I don't think that'll be a big issue. Interest rates there are pretty low at this point. What you tend to see in the short term, however, is maybe a repatriation in capital. There's a lot of funds that the Japanese have overseas, and there's a tendency to bring those back. And so you see a little bit of upward pressure on the yen in the short term.
Scott, what about, we talked a lot about the nuclear power plant and the shutdown there and the concerns there. What about that impact on Japan specifically, and maybe more need, more demand for oil as a result?
Well, certainly Japan is a big importer of oil, and you know, a lot obviously depends on how long the nuclear plants stay shut down. If it's an extended period where they don't get back online, then maybe they have to import more oil down the line. So that's basically the pattern. You tend to see a hit in the economy in the short term, obviously some rebuilding, which will boost GDP growth over the next several months. It may be very similar to what we saw after the Kobe earthquake. That was a smaller magnitude earthquake, but I think this earthquake, even though it's more severe, may end up having even a smaller impact on the economy.
Scott, forgive me, because we've been looking at images throughout the day. It's hard not to kind of have your breath taken away as you look at the devastation here. You seem to be pretty calm about the impact here in terms of on Japan. I mean, is it really not such a big deal? I mean, obviously it is because of the loss of life, but I mean, we're looking at, it looks like incredible devastation here.
Yeah, certainly our thoughts and prayers go out to those that were killed and to their families. It obviously is a very unfortunate situation. But in terms of looking at the economic impact, we do know that there are going to be short-term effects and long-term effects. But a lot of it is still up in the air. It's going to be really a number of days before we can assess the amount of the damage and the likely scenario of how to repair that damage.
What about the effect on global trade, Scott? Obviously, Japan's shores have been devastated as well. Shipping could be a problem there. We're already hearing all the oil refineries have been shut down. We're seeing the effect there on oil. I mean, what about the effect on global trade? What do you expect?
Well, certainly trade is very important, obviously, for Japan, and a lot, again, depends on the degree of damage at the ports. If they're shut down over the short term, that may not be too devastating, but you know, if this is much more serious, then that could disrupt trade for a while. Japan exports a lot to the U.S. They also export a lot to the rest of Asia. In terms, a lot of the rest of Asia will export into Japan. And so you may have some disruptions there. If you think of your smaller farmer in one of these smaller Asian countries supplying restaurants or so, maybe their business may end up drying up completely. So the local effects could be pretty significant still.
All right, hey Scott, we appreciate you joining us today. Scott Brown there, chief economist at Raymond James.